Hello and welcome to Biorules Video Lessons. Today we are going to be talking about succession. Succession means modification, no, but in the idea that one comes after the other, that comes after the other. So which one succeeds the other? Well, what are we talking about here? We are talking about a place with no life. No, this here in the Indic Ocean in the beginning of the 19th century, there was a place there that, it was ocean, there was no solid land. And suddenly, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was Krakatau. Krakatau was an underwater volcano eruption that from one day to the next created an island. A very, very, very hot island. And that very hot island, of course, had no life on it because nothing can survive in such high temperatures, hundreds of degrees Celsius. But as soon as the rock cooled down, some plants, some mosses, they started getting over there. By the wind, by the water, by whatever, they started arriving there. And these lichens and mosses, they are very tough. They are capable of growing even over bare rock. They don't need to have soil, substrate, compost, whatever. They go there and they survive on anywhere. Simple bare rock they are capable of growing. These lichens then started getting replaced or complemented with little shrubs. The shrubs, okay, but for the shrubs to grow, then you start having soil. Well, where is the soil going to come from? Oh, the soil comes from erosion, making sand, dead rocks. You're going to see that in a moment. And after the shrubs, then you start having small trees. And after the small trees, then we expect that one day we start having big trees on Krakatau. So this is the idea that you have a change in the structure of the community over time. So we call a primary succession when you start from zero, when you start from bare rock, so no soil. It was example here in Krakatau. No soil, the rocks suffer weathering, making sand. Oh, but sand is not good enough for the survival of many species. Many species don't like to live in sand. But the first organisms to arrive there, they start to decay. They die, they are decomposed, and they form compost. Compost mixed with sand makes soil. And now you have soil for small plants to grow. And when this dies, they make more soil for bigger plants to be able to be growing. So this is the idea of succession. And this is Krakatau. Actually, this is 100 years later after the initial eruption. And what we see around there is actually green. We have little plants growing over there, lichens, mosses, and shrubs. Okay, still not big trees. We don't have them there yet because it's still not in that stage of succession. But the idea is that it will get there eventually. Okay, we have, in around 100 years, we have plants growing, in the soil that was made by the erosion of the rocks and the compost of the dead bodies that arrived there fast. Okay, so here, primary structure, primary succession, sorry, not structure, primary succession. It starts from zero and the life can change the environment. We saw that before. Planet Earth has been changed by the photosynthesizing organism, and an island made of pure molten, very hot rock can be changed over time because life can change the environment. It creates the soil from bare rock. Okay, and here we have a visual image of the succession. You have bare rock. The bare rocks, you have lichens and other stuff that are capable of living on them. You start having erosion that makes sand, and with the dead plants, they make a compost, and you start having some small annual plants and lichens. Then you start having grasses and perennials. Then you have grasses, shrubs, shade-intolerant trees, like pine trees, whatever. And then you start having the shade-tolerant trees like oaks or hickory getting to the climax. This is a very slow process. This takes hundreds of years, okay, many hundreds of years for you to go from bare rock all the way to a climax community. On the other hand, there is one thing called secondary succession. Secondary succession is similar in the idea that it's a change, but the soil is already formed. So when the soil is already formed, we will have not primary but secondary succession. That's the difference between primary and secondary succession. Soil. When do we have secondary succession? No, when you have a simple change in the plant community. For example, when you have a fire, or when a tree falls, or when you have an earthquake and many trees falls, okay, or you have a hurricane that many trees fall. So when you have this kind of change, then you have a quick change that leads to a very dramatic change in the composition. Usually it wipes off most of the plants that are in the place, but the soil is already formed. So in a few years you have no annual plants. Now in 3 or 4 years you have grass or perennial plants. Now from 5 to 150 years you have the intermediate species, and in a little bit more than 150 years, so 1.5 century, so few hundred years, you have the climax community back into the place. So this here is relatively fast in comparison to primary succession. Okay, so here an example of secondary succession. You have a climax forest that suffers fire, but the soil is still there. And if the soil is still there, then you have the pioneers growing, and then you have the transition or the intermediate species growing over there until you go back to a climax forest again. And all this in few hundred years. Okay, 1.5, 200 years, you have this change back there again. Okay, an example of a succession that was not Krakatau, 1980, happened an eruption, a volcano called St. Helens in the state of Washington. So St. Helens erupted and created a massive destruction. No, it dropped all the trees around with a shock wave of more than 900 kilometers an hour. It dropped all the trees, and actually it covered most of that area with hot ashes that basically extincted all life that was there. So if you put that in numbers, we'll see that before the eruption, before 1980s, we had around almost 300 species living in there. And just after the eruption, this number dropped to almost 0. And since then, this number is increasing. Into 1994, the number of species were already half the number, or more than half, of what we had before. So this place is recovering, this place is suffering succession, one coming after the other. Quite simple idea, quite simple concept, very important in ecology, because wherever you have space, species are going to be occupying, and if it's a free space, pioneer species occupy, and then start going and changing until you have back a climax community. Okay? If you want to watch a video about that, there is a link over here. It's interesting, okay? And now we have a few questions here in a questionnaire to see if you are mastering the idea of succession. See you in another video.